Well, good evening, everybody. What's the story? So, I wanted to talk about the National Party news tonight that the National Party have consolidated finally. And to me, that's a big old bit of news in its own way. And I kind of want to talk about it. The National Party under Patrick Quinlan represents this kind of shift in the, like, it's a subculture, I suppose. It's a small political landscape compared to the whole society, and in a sort of a way. But within that, it's kind of significant, the shift to new national party or whatever we call it, just the national party now, I suppose, and the legacy of the former national party with led by Justin Barrett, founded in 2016, and I'm not going to pretend to have like a massively highly prepared PowerPoint for you here. I've had toddlers kind of screaming at me for the evening and that. So I'm just coming live to kind of give you my thoughts a little bit on the fly. I've been mulling it over a bit. And yeah, it's significant. It's sort of a milestone. And I find myself thinking overall that it's a good development. I mean, better to just have done with it. The It is what it is. It has been Patrick Quinlan's national party for a long time now, for years. So all of this consternation is just unhelpful anyway. It was kind of a foregone conclusion, I believe, from the point of the, as some people call it, a coup. Look, I don't know exactly what happened with that. It was Justin Barrett, was he legitimately voted out, or he claims otherwise? He claimed otherwise, and the commission would have found differently. The Electoral Commission, and I'm going to read through. Hello, chat. I'm going to read through just a mainstream media article on it now, because that's kind of objective. Closest thing to objective as we're going to find, because if I listen to Quinlan, if I listen to Barrett, if I listen to this or that other person, maybe they've a dog in the fight, right? But perhaps the Sunday World would be slightly more outside and objective to it. But yeah, there was the split, we'll call it, which was an extremely difficult affair and almost comical. The gold and all of that, people have a laugh off that. Like the amount of kind of madness that's been going on with this national party for the last 9 years since it was founded in 2016. In a way, it represents and tracks my own involvement with nationalist politics. Just make videos sometimes. I've done some like video essays and stuff. I don't claim to be a major figure, but insofar as I've been observing and somewhat involved in all this since, let's say, 2015 or 16, the National Party, the original one, formed then. And so it tracks with my time involved with this stuff. And so it's a bit of a kind of, you could say, the official marking of an end of an era and the beginning of a new one with all of this. So yeah, Justin Barrett founded the National Party in 2016. And chat, remind me when the coup split happened, whatever we want to call it, the split. With post-COVID brain, I just don't even know anymore. What was it, 2 years ago? Was it 4 years ago? I don't know. I'm meant to be telling you, I suppose. I can look it up. But anyway, it feels like it was, what, 2 years ago? Something like that. It's kind of irrelevant in a sense. It doesn't matter. There was this split, and now we have this. We have Clan Éireann with Justin Barrett. This, I don't even know what to call it. Sort of like, I don't know, an activist group. I'm going to stumble over some of this stuff because I am an outside observer to National Party stuff and have been since day one. So all of the gritty details, I don't fully comprehend, but I do have a pretty good awareness, probably more than a lot of the average content consumer pundit or content consumer like person. So I have a point of view, I've seen a lot. Yeah, so they they've been this big part of like what I've been involved in. And from day one, I never involved myself directly with them. I never joined. I had a lot of solicitation from just random members or whatever, not from any of the leaders, but from members over the years, join the NP because I'm a semi coherent, semi normal, face presenting person out there. So like, why not join the National Party? And I didn't because I valued my own role as a observer and sort of a not a critic, but potentially a critic or just an observer. That's what I wanted to do. So I didn't want to. I'm just watching your chat there. I'm half as interested in just looking at what you have to say as well. But I didn't want to be subject to some sort of controls, to be honest. And some party person telling me what to do, what to say, where to go, what to do. I was like, that's just not me. I won't function well in that anyway. I'm more used just giving my opinion. So I got to watch the whole thing kind of unfold over time. And to this day, not that they'd necessarily want me anyway, but with the new NP, I would be the same way. It's just my thing. I'm not joining a party, right? And the same, of course, would go for Clan Éireann. But it's been a fascinating, wild ride. The other reason I've found that more germane to me, or more relevant and interesting to me, the sort of run of the National Party and the different iterations of it from 2016 to now, is because, in my opinion, for all of the faults you could make about old or new National Party, they have always been the only interesting, viable, salvageable political thing in Irish right-wing politics, be it conservative, nationalist, or anything else. That's always been my view, because they had the radical edge, and they would say somewhat the unsayable. Their aesthetics from day one, continuing to this day, were always intelligent and sophisticated, not gaudy, not the R word, or tarded, right? Can I say that? They had sophisticated aesthetics and ideas, and they weren't afraid to be bowled and just be real about it, right? And every other thing, no offense, right? Don't get upset, but every other thing was a Mickey Mouse, just a joke, just like, to me, right? And that's it. Take it or leave it. So the National Party had my ear the whole time. It is where the people who got it were. It's where the people who were unapologetic were, and the people who were intelligent, and the people who were young. You need young people, young minds, somewhat sophisticated people, and all of that. And I've been a fan, but of course I had my criticisms along the way as well. And I always kept them to myself, for various reasons. One because I had such fondness for a lot of the members and a lot of the presentation of the party in certain ways. So I just thought, why would I criticize them? They're the closest thing to something I recognize and relate with. So have at it. That someone mentions there, Stephen in the chat says IFP or Civic Nationalist and pro-Israel. I'm not sure. I don't even know where they're at, but probably somewhat. And certainly most of right-wing nationalist conservative politics and all that is that way. And but the National Party were different, and that's what mattered. So one of the reasons I didn't comment or kind of criticize them so much was because I liked them, and the other reason was because, in a way, it was such a shit show, and it was always a shit show, but escalating as the years went on, actually, more so over time. That maybe around the time when Phil Dwyer left / was kicked out, I'm not sure. Even by then, which is many years ago now, it just you know, and I'm not one to spill detail of, like, I obviously know a lot of people in this orbit, and you talk to people and you hear this and that. I don't come on streams and kind of blather out everything I hear privately or behind the scenes stuff or whatever. I don't do that, but just generally speaking, I would talk to people out of curiosity because I want to be informed. I'd say, what's kind of going on? Like, I know you can only tell me so much. You're a member of a party. I'm an outsider, whatever. But like, you know, kind of what's going on. Tell me a little bit. And a lot of them would keep cards close to the chest. There were factions within it. So many people were unhappy. So many people thought it was being misled by Justin or by James Reynolds, but then other people say, no, it's not them. It's this guy who's behind the scenes, who's the mastermind, or all this kind of shit, right? And I would spend a lot of sort of time and energy trying to figure it out sometimes, just so I know to some extent roughly what's going on there. And I could never quite get my head around it because depending on who I spoke to, it was someone else or something else or some other faction. Oh, it's the Zoomer Spurgs, it's the this, it's the that, it's Justin, it's whoever. And I could just never get a clear picture on what the issue quite was. So I just stayed away from it. The other thing is that there was a wing of online activists, and you could never tell again, were they pro or anti-Justin, which ones, who's what. And a lot of them would be kind of fishing for your take, or they'd want to come at you if you had one take or another take. You can't quite figure out what it is. And they would be very aggressive. And a lot of people would be familiar with this. A certain cadre of Anons, who were clearly NP proxies, would just give you a lot of grief online if you stepped into that world, almost no matter which way, what take you had. It was just like a poison chalice to even go near, you know, or if that, maybe that's a bad analogy. But you get me. And so for me, it was just a case of, hey, whatever, let them be. I'm not involved in it. I'm glad I'm not a member. I'm glad I'm not subscribed to that. But I do also like a lot of what they have to say, what they're doing. And I like a lot of their members. And they're the best gig in town as far as I'm concerned. And basically, there's some things I don't like about it. There's clearly a lot of consternation and a lot of trouble there. But at the same time, there's so much good there as well. So for all those reasons kind of combined, and then of course, because I've sort of friends or acquaintances who are in the middle of it all and that too, I just felt like, look, just let it be. To me, from many, many years ago, I knew that it was DOA eventually. It just seemed obvious to me. Like, for those reasons I've described, the consternation, the sort of a mix of not militancy, but like a paranoid intensity, sort of from somewhere, from the ether. Was it from Justin, Ladaz, or was it the other guy? And not, I don't know, but just that kind of intensity, that purity spiraling, all of that kind of stuff, almost like sometimes a bit of an obsessive control freakism. And again, just coming from the ether of the National Party, I didn't know. And I would ask people in there, people on opposite side, as a sort of a journalist, so to speak, I would sort of try to, I like ruthlessly didn't have a dog in the fight. You know, I like this guy, I don't like that guy. It doesn't matter to me. I just wanted to try and understand it. And I couldn't, because for the reasons I've described, it's just too messy. And so to me, it just structurally, it's like, yeah, this cannot last. And the problem is here, the problem is there's so much good in this. Clearly, so many members are great. I don't know where the aesthetics, where the ideological sort of firmness is from, the sophistication of it, all of that. I don't know where it's from exactly, but the personnel, the ideas, the quality, in a lot of ways, not all, but in a lot of ways, is too good, and it's good versus a whole bunch of shit elsewhere. So if there's, like with Orwell in 1984, if there's any hope, it lies with the proles. I'm kind of going, if there's any hope, it lies with NP or within NP or something or other, but it's in that box in which we will find people who are sophisticated. They're not Zionists. They're not like boomer cons. They're not, dedicating their time to talking about cycle lanes or bullshit or, the usual shtick. They're proper nationalists. And so that was always my feeling about it. And so the split is kind of interesting. You kind of go, okay, well, maybe I got what I not so much wanted. And again, to be clear, someone could say, accuse me of being some sort of interloper or whatever. What happened with the National Party all the way through, I never had any, not obviously no role, but no even whispering campaigns, like, or knowing about this or that, or trying to shove this person or that person out from like an interloper point of view. Never really did. But in a sense, someone could say, well, didn't you kind of get what you want? You have the NP, you have the solidity, you have Patrick Quinlan, he's solid, and happy days and all of that stuff. And that's pretty much like largely true. And then the question comes up of course, Justin Barrett. I've always refrained from that too, for the same reason as what I've described about the NP in general. Overall, it's just a big minefield. And, I had this thing of, I'm not going to go out and lambaste Irish Freedom Party or this or that. These are all seedling kind of parties, and to be honest, none of them I think are great. Really, none of them are perfect or ideal, and most of them have serious problems. So far be it from me to go out and start lambasting and critiquing every single thing out there. There'd be nothing left, right? It's in a formative era. So again, the same reason I wouldn't criticize sort of anyone in that sense was this applied to Barrett too. And yet, of course, and then one more thing. Some of the reasons I thought NP were good, I also somewhat, how could I not attribute some of that to Barrett, in spite of any issues I might have had or with what he did or how he was, in spite of any, which I might get into, but in spite of any of that, I was like, well, if I believe NP has the best game in town and he is the leader and the founder, there has to be a degree to which, in spite of anything you could say about him, he has created this thing, founded it, and maintains it. And if you want to say, well, it's all the other guys did the good work and this and that and the other, or whatever, in spite of him or something like that, at the end of the day, if he founded it and ran it, somehow he must have played a role in the quality of it in a certain sense. So that was an element too, where I'm like going, well, yeah, I can't exactly lash into him about this or that thing I don't like, because he does run the party that I think is the best. Maybe I'm doing too much caveating and all that. At the end of the day, TLDR, I never thought Barrett had what it takes to be the leader of a party that could transition from a sort of a pure message, strong, ideologically pure, unapologetic, all of that, into getting a foothold, electorally, and if not electorally, just culturally, in terms of fashion, kind of, just the whole thing, could gain purchase with the Irish people, particularly the younger people. Even if National Party is perfect and they've got great everything, he's at the head of it. I just don't think he's the guy for that, right? And there's people out there like the Burkean recently. I had a little disagreement with them, let's say. They tore the shit out of him in a piece, right, off the wall. And a lot of what they said is true. But my thing isn't so much to character assassinate him or necessarily come through every poor taste decision that I believe he may have made, or lack of leadership qualities, or any the usual criticisms of Barrett. I'm sure a lot of, maybe not all, but a lot of them I think I'd agree with. Most people would. But it's, to me, it's not so much a character assassination of him, because the thing is, well, I don't know what he pays it. Let's say he's watching this now or later. Let's just say, right? The thing is, someone might say, well, what would he think of that? That's a very mean thing to say, or that's like a fractious thing, or you've given your take on Barrett. You don't like Barrett or any of that stuff. It's kind of like, look, how could that be the case in a way? First off, I don't know him. Secondly, the same way as I don't believe just a personal subjective thing, I don't think he ever had what it takes to be the sort of all-round everyman, the leader, the guy who could take it from gear to gear to gear, for everything that takes or requires. How could that, in a sense, be a sort of personal insult when I would 150% apply that to myself? The bar for what is needed to take a nationalist party, or just engage in this world at all, in a really forward facing, because it's easy for me to sit here and stream, bloviate, pontificate, whatever. That's easy. Make some TikToks. That's easy. All forms of sort of activism, journalism, contributions, and all that are what they are. But to be the person who takes the ideas, the organization, the heat, the personalities, all of that stuff, the bar for that is so fucking high, it's unreal. Character wise, you really need to sort of almost Mr. Potato Head someone up, like grab all the pieces, these requisite characteristics you need in someone who can be that guy. It's such a problematic thing, because that person is so elusive in a way, and those types of people are so elusive. But yeah, Justin Barrett, to put it in the politest kind of way, he's an idiosyncratic person, individual, right? Clearly. The Burkean article, which I actually overall disagreed with, and I was kind of harsh towards it, it went through in sort of searing detail, criticisms, personal life, all this kind of stuff, right? Which I don't really agree with doing that, but you could go through the stuff individually. I don't like doing that with people, but it's needless to say, he's got his own issues. He's an idiosyncratic person, sort of high ideological mind, loves being a political operator, or self-styled as like this sort of like political genius or whatever, and it just doesn't quite map onto the reality a bit, and all of that kind of stuff. That just wouldn't cut it. I all day long I would listen, well, not all day long, but like I would listen to a Justin Barrett, or read a Justin Barrett Substack. I would listen to his video or whatever, or read his book, you know what I mean? And it would be some of the finest ideological work going, and it would be well able to call out the frauds, the corruption, the milquetoastness, all that of politics, of right-wing politics, and the rest. And it's very interesting. But of course, you can't just do that. You can be a vanguard of a vanguard of a vanguard and play that role, perhaps. But at some point the transition has to be made. There has to be this kind of real world, wholesome center face to the whole thing. And it just, to me, I was like, all the good of National Party, if it's to continue and grow, it has to have a normal person. And again, it's not even a character assassination on Barrett. I don't consider myself a normal person either, and that's why I don't run a party, and I don't claim to be some sort of party leader, kingmaker, this or that or the other. I'm just doing my thing, right? I'm limited. I'm a limited human being. I don't know if that makes sense to some of you guys, if that kind of rocks with you. Like, you have to recognize your own limitations as a person. And on the other hand, when it, if not you, who, if not now, when? That's the counter argument to that. But realistically, nobody's perfect, right? So at some point, someone has to take up the mantle. I get that. But, they have to have a reasonable level of confidence in themselves, and crucially, confidence of those around them. And, Barrett claims it was a dastardly coup or whatever, but I think it's fair to say probably a lot of the membership within National Party, by the time that rolled around, were not happy with Barrett as leader. And he could claim, oh, they were wrong or they were tricked or something like that. But that probably was the reality as far as I could see. So it's just one of those things. The humility is probably to step out of the way. And in a way, it's, you could say it's a political character flaw or whatever, if you can't recognize your own limitations and where they fit with the broader picture, but there's a flip side to that as well, because in another way, I'm an admirer of Barrett for his stridency and the Vanguard. And it may be, it's actually, let's take Barrett out of the picture, the individual. Someone could say, because people delve into personal life stuff, and I'm not interested in that. So put him aside or whatever, but just what he represents on the field, on the chessboard of the Vanguard, I suppose you could call it the extreme. To me, it matters in a way. So someone could say, yeah, that's grand, but just not Barrett. How about someone else, but not him? That's up to you. But as it happens, he does occupy that, and has traditionally occupied, at least in the last 10 years, that kind of space with the person who is never happy. Everyone's always a sellout. No one's ever pure enough. No one's ever pushing it hard enough. No one's ever like at the extremity of the radical end of things. I don't know. There's this impetus from some people to want to purge that, get rid of that, excoriate that. And to me, it's like, I don't know, you kind of need that. That whole thing of the left never disavow the far left ever, right? Isn't there a lesson to be taken from that? If you're a counter-Semitic individual, you're against Jewish influence and all of that. It's one of those things where you go, sometimes if that's your view, don't you have to look at what they do and take heed of it? Or Muslims with their cultural and cultural advancement strategies and all of the rest of it. Don't you look into how their family and clan and religion and stridency and all that, learn from their successes in a way. And if you look at the left, they never, like, some of the most preposterous, ghoulish things you can imagine happen on the fringes of the far left. Antifa, we're talking, I mean, only recently, Charlie Kirk murder, right? Straight up murder. That's not a lesson we need to take, but I'm just illustrating the point that they don't disavow anything ever, right? And they don't sort of do that. Even if the person on the extreme far left is poor taste, a bad look, most of the public would disagree. They just don't really do that. And I sort of stick to that. Good chat there, lads. But I tend to stick to that. Like, you don't have to embrace the Vanguard fringe or whatever, but I suppose if you don't have to embrace it publicly or love it. It's almost just kind of, my take is just ignore it in a way if it's not for you, if you're not interested, if you think it's ridiculous. And and it sort of self-isolates itself anyway if it's too ridiculous and all of that. So I don't know. There's this idea of like Justin Barrett having been the anchor in a sense, that we are all subject in this system to drift to the center, to the left, whatever you want to call it, drift into conformity. And that's in a way, something I'm uncomfortable with as well. This whole idea that you completely lambaste and assassinate, figuratively speaking, the Vanguard coordinated kind of strike in order to free yourself from it so you can just be normal or whatever. And it's like, I don't know. Again, you don't see the left doing that, and we could learn from them. And two, just in a game theory sense, yes, it does facilitate this whole thing of not wanting Barrett or Clonairin or whatever to exist. You know, I'm not a fan of that stuff. I certainly won't be at one of those things. I won't really be reposting it so much because it's just not that I'm too bourgeois, just because I think it's kind of silly. But I don't mind the fact that it's out there in a way, in some form anyway. I think I don't think it drags the normals down. I think it, if anything, creates room. If you think about it like a spectrum, well, if the spectrum is dragged all the way out to there, you know, at the narrow vanguard sort of radical end of things, doesn't it by default normalize everything inside of it further by relative proximity or whatever? That's just the logical take I would have of it, right? So I don't want it. Wouldn't really want to get rid of that. Someone asking me there, would I cover the Charlie Kirk assassination? I did like 3 like long-winded streams about that, but and I actually think I did pretty well. Do you know what? Because like there's a few people out there who I listen to, not many, but like, you know, I could go through it if someone's interested at some point, but like one of them would be Fuentes, and I listened to his first stream and I thought it was quite good, and I listened to 1 or 2 other people who I go, yeah, I kind of respect, or at least I'm interested in their take, and I kind of put out my take, but I was quite pleased with how I subsequently listened to people like those. You know, basically, I feel like I did my streams and then I heard some other streams over a week, and I was like, do you know what? I'm hearing some of the same thoughts. I suppose it's just a case of great minds think alike, maybe. That you know, it's always gratifying when people you respect arrive at similar conclusions independently, as opposed to being like a total dumbass or whatever. So I'm pleased that way. But yeah, anyway, I talked about Charlie Kirk. Yeah. So in terms of the National Party, anyway, there's that question of like Vanguard and you know, gaudy and radical and unpalatable for the average person and all of this. Is that to be like purged, or is it to be quietly accepted, you know, and like welcomed in a way? That's one of those questions, and it cuts to the heart of the political future for the right in Ireland. I know that sounds big, but I do believe so, especially with this new National Party, this normalization that's sort of happening, that has got to do with broader geopolitical trends and all of that. There is sort of room, and the wind in the sails a little bit, to also just because of lived reality, immigration and all of these things are so bad, for nationalism to normalize. But with that, of course, comes a certain amount of peril of this whole basically selling out effectively, right? And it applies to us all. It so applies to this sphere, to be honest, because the pressures, the inputs are basically designed for it. You have very little money or reward or, you know, celebrity, like, you don't get to do ads with Lucozade like Garen, or you don't get to go, visit your old school and everyone comes out and cheers for you. You're not, there's none of that kudos coming from it. Money is difficult in the sense that you haven't got any corporate sponsorship, any of that. And the opposite too, like, it's hard to make money just like flipping burgers at McDonald's, because they can try and get you sacked for that too, if you're like nationalist or controversial or whatever. The usual inputs. And then within the right wing, or right wing politics writ large, there is a huge amount of foreign money, or not a huge amount, sorry, that's putting it too strongly. There exists foreign money, as there does with any form of politics, any form of activism. If you're in favor of saving ash trees in Ireland, doesn't matter what it is, there will be influence and networks and benefactors and all of that around the place. And by nature, most of it is from outside of Ireland, because we're in this Western, pan-Western world, right? So what you have within the right wing is this, they're basically the influence and the money will constantly drag you towards some sort of compromise, or sort of watering down of positions, or being dragged along with totally parallel positions, like unrelated in a sense positions. And it's not even a case of people selling out consciously. There's just a drift. Sometimes people do sell out consciously, but there is an inevitable pull and drift. Basically the carrot and the stick, right? Put it that way. That drags people into becoming just basically NPC face, like right-wing conservative or whatever. Excuse me for the loud sip. And that's always there. So it's one of those things that the more you succeed, the more you normalize, the more you come into the center. That comes with, of course, a cost as well. And it'll be, whether it's for parties or individuals, it's such a tiring exercise to be involved in nationalism. You have so much against you that if someone brings you in out of the cold, hands you the cup of tea, puts the blanket over you, says, hey, you're safe here, or, we've got your back, or we want to help you out, or whatever, there's, you're going to welcome it, because outside is a blizzard and a storm, and it's atrocious, right? And it's worn you down to the nub. And also you might think, my idea is I do want to get them somewhere, and sometimes you have to play the game and all that. All of these things, these are realities just across the board, whether you're a YouTuber, a party, a this, that, the other, it's a reality. And we see it so much at the highest levels as well. Look at Trump and Maloney, and look at the Tories, and look at, we're going to replace the Tories now with Reform and Farage. And, the reason that sort of moderation and going along to get alongism isn't actually necessarily a good thing, although it looks like a good thing, is because you do end up with, Farage or Maloney or Trump. And some people say that's better than nothing, but, it's like, okay, for all that political capital and work and energy and ambition that's been applied to it, and for it to effectively go nowhere, really, it's not necessarily the best option. There's no great option, but it's just like, when people say, if we can be normalized now and accepted a bit more and get safe harbor and all of that, that's inevitably a good thing. There's no downside to that. There's no peril to that or whatever. It's like, it's not always necessarily a bad thing, but it's not just it's not just a good thing either. That's one. It's so, which is the opposite to like Barrett. We don't want to be like Barrett. We'll be totally normal. We'll have suits, and we'll kind of stop talking about this, that, and the other, and whatever. And our integrity will just take us the whole way there, because we're all good guys and we all care about Ireland or whatever. It's like, it's not as simple. We all are good, but we're not as well. And we're all human, and organizations are complicated, and political movements are complicated, and drift can happen without any individual constituent even realizing it. It's that kind of way. But so that's one of those things. This whole kind of new national party, as I said at the outset, I see it as almost entirely a good thing. And I don't want to pin this on National Party. I just mean the broader political shift, let's say, in from the cold a bit, and maybe jettisoning some of the idiosyncratic personalities and the distasteful elements or expressions and all of that. Like overall, I would say that not only is that okay, but that's essential. It just has to happen, you know. But it just comes with peril as well. And so if you want to call it the jettisoning of Barrettism and the move in from the cold, it may overall be a good thing, but it comes fraught as well. I hope I'm kind of making that point sufficiently. So that's my overall take. There's more to say as well. I might go through the Burkean stuff. It'll kind of prompt me a little bit. Let's just look at the Sunday World article and just kind of get into the mate a little bit. So Justin Barrett loses appeal against changes to National Party entry on official register. The former leader of the far-right party, Justin Barrett, has lost his appeal, blah, blah, blah. The Electoral Commission dismissed a challenge taken by Barrett against the decision, blah, blah, blah. Let's see where we're going here. The appeal followed from Mr. Barrett being ousted as president of the National Party in July 2023. I said 2 years ago, I was correct. Following a bitter internal row with its deputy leader and co-founder, James Reynolds. There's another guy, right? I've met him. I think, did I interview him? I think I did a while back on YouTube. But again, I don't know him. He doesn't, you know, it's not personal, but he is not the material for taking like a nationalist party that is both vanguard and radical, but also solid, approachable, appealing, sound internally and all of that stuff. He's just not the guy. Barrett's not the guy. I'm not the guy. It's one of those kind of things. So in a sense, one of the problems it had all along was a bit structural. And then the other thing, I'm already drifting, but is the wing of, let's say, Anons, or I think it was a class. The impression I've always got, it was a class of younger Anon purity spiralers, and this is a problem we all have. I'm guilty. We're all guilty of it, right? To some extent, is that we all think we are so right and have such the right idea, and we can kind of lurk and sort of throw stones and assert control over how things move and who does what, because we've so got the right idea, right? We all recognize that feeling a bit, surely. But when I say they, the old National Party, maybe some of it's drifted into the new one, though I don't think so much. But there was they obviously share DNA. There was especially in the past, a wing of them that were so kind of like antisocial, spurgy, and sort of stalkery, you know, like back in the day when Twitter likes existed, you know, they'd be making notes of who liked what and all this kind of stuff, you know, this kind of like fever dream, sort of fever nightmare of these anonymous, you know, they're party affiliated some way on some faction or other, and they think they can just go around and basically try to bully people, and then hyper like ironic, dripping in irony and this kind of I don't know what it is, but that was the thing as well. That was kind of like, I don't know, it's grand, but it's kind of it like saddled NP with this negativity, I feel like, you know, and no one was almost ever good enough in a sense for that, to pass the test or whatever. But anyway, so that's some of those. I don't know how I went off on that, but anyway, a party official, Paul Conroy, has applied to amend the original entry of the National Party and blah blah blah. The proposed amendments in particulars of the accounting unit. Late in the night. The proposed amendments included particulars of the accounting unit of the party, its new address, and the change of statutory authorized officers, which would result in the removal of Mr. Barrett's name from the registry. Okay, so just a load of boring bureaucratic stuff. I thought this would get into a bit more juicy kind of, you know, what happened stuff. The commission found that he had offered no evidence, referring to Barrett here, offered no evidence that the meeting was rigged or involved a coup, or that his supporters were deliberately excluded. It also ruled that the EGM of the National Party, called by Mr. Barrett and held online on November 16, 2024, was without authority, as the new National Directorate had the authority for the internal governance of the party at that stage following the AGM. So it sounds like, according to the sort of official men in suits who would have went over this, who probably don't have too much of a dog in the fight, let's be real, I found that it was somewhat above board. I'm sure Justin Barrett would dispute that. I have to assume. But like, they didn't kind of like push a button and he disappeared down a tube or whatever, it wasn't Dr. Evil style sort of stuff. And like I say, from what I was familiar with, a lot of the people in the party, it's kind of the Hitler stuff and all that, and like some people would claim that like he wasn't so involved in what was going on, but there's kind of like, so you wouldn't see him or hear from him much, but there's like a man behind the curtain. But I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to delve into the particulars. That's all NP drama from back in the day. But put it this way, from what I did know, and I didn't have a dog in the fight, what I was hearing from it, more and more and more people over time, was dissatisfaction with him for one reason or another, either for the ideological extremity or for just the running of the party, how they're treated as people, this, that, and the other. And I'm sure he could say it was someone else's fault. I don't know, but it was his party and a lot of people weren't happy and he got shoved out. To me, it sounds pretty straightforward and sort of ultimately legitimate. Put aside the electoral committee rules, they say it's legitimate, but beyond that, just in general, it's kind of legitimate in the sense that that's just the way things went. A lot of people weren't happy with it. They kind of signed up originally for like a radical, sophisticated enough party, but within limits, you know what I mean? We're not going to be standard basic bitch conservatives, but also we're going to be fairly clean cut, straightforward, responsible. And it feels like it just drifted into something else over time, and people wanted to split off. To me, it should be fine in a way. Like if I was Barrett, I'd be like, grand. I mean, if that's the way it's gone, I'll maintain my thing in a sense. Like I'll maintain what I want to do. I'll just call it something else or whatever, It was always a bit pedantic in a way, because it's like, okay, let's say Barrett holds on to NP officially, let's say, even though a lot of people wanted to leave or go or him out. It's in a sense, it's not neither here nor there. Okay, he keeps NP as a brand, and then the rest of them just go off and form this subsequent thing, call it something else, right? Ireland, galore or whatever, right? But or they kind of hold on to the National Party and he forms Clan Éireann, and so be it. Like, Clan Éireann are going further down the line that Justin Barrett was the trajectory that he was on over the years, getting more and more a certain way. Clan Éireann are now the logical extension of that. And the rest of them, the majority of the people, I believe, in the party, have gone the other way. It's grand. To me, that's grand. And I'm not trying to have Clan Éireann, ship to the moon or whatever either. They can do whatever they do. It's none of my business. I'm not going to go out of the way to, condemn them or whatever. It's, I don't even pay much attention to any of that. If they get attacked, I will defend them. At the end of the day, they're broadly on the same side of the clock, we'll say. So I don't know. To me, it's like, isn't that a peaceful enough resolution of the whole thing? Isn't that okay? Just leave it all in the dust now, or the consternation in the dust. And but then we come back to that question of, okay, so we're all going to put suits on and be normal. That's the big question, is like, what underlies all of this in a sense? Where does the right wing go? And this is where we might get into. Actually, one thing first, I'll just read the National Party statement. I'm actually just going to read it, right? And there are great lads, like as critics will say, there were good lads in the National Party who were happy to push the envelope in terms of not denying that nationalism is connected to ethnicity. Do you know, basic stuff like that? Not denying or not being like a right-wing cartoon character, like a libertarian, you know, being actually somewhat socialist, we'll say, a form of, you know what I'm saying, right? Like, you know, not being a libertarian, basically, being anti-finance capitalism and all that kind of stuff, being a proper nationalist, right? There were lads who were willing to step, and that's really stepping out into the cold, to be honest, relatively speaking, like, you know, not being Zionist, at the very least, not being Zionist. Whatever about being anti-Zionist, at least not being actively Zionist. But so that was good. And some of the criticism was, well, Justin always pushing the envelope, which was fine if he wanted to. I'm all for people going out there being avant-garde. But of course, you've got a lot of young people who've signed their families and their lives up to this stuff, and their faces out there now. It's sort of like you would definitely want to have a strong consent from everyone involved to go dragging their personal lives potentially into that new sort of escalating level of branding, like, you know. So again, a lot of the issues are contained there. I believe with this solution, it seems to be sorted. I don't know, is Justin happy? I don't know how everyone feels and what their emotions are like or whatever, but just on a technical observational level, seems pretty logical of a conclusion to me. But the National Party statement I liked, and I found this to be a very mature and satisfactory take. I'm really pleased with it as an outsider looking in. So official statement from the Ard Cearla. I'll get to the bit I like, right? So they say the Electoral Commission rejected an obstructionist appeal from Justin Barrett, etc., etc. We welcome the decision, etc. But with the National Party, founded in 2016, remains committed to its core ideology and strategy of building a serious political movement which aims to fight and win elections by offering the Irish people a radical set of nationalist policies. The strategy has shown a success, and the party has now elected representation. So I like the fact that, at least on paper, they're sort of any of my potential concerns, at least on paper, they are cognizant of not the concerns that I'm speaking to, are, you know, as in they're not saying, okay, now let's go be like Pater Tobin now, let's go do or something like that. Committed to a core ideology. We'll have to see how they live up to it and all the rest of it. People can have whatever feelings they want as we go, but at least they are putting a flag down here, putting a marker down that they are committed to this. So the other entity to have emerged from the July 23 change in leadership, Clan Éireann, has taken shape around Mr. Barrett's minority of supporters. Its presentation and strategy are anathema to that of the National Party. It therefore represents an inconsistency and a break with the National Party, a widely acknowledged fact that has finally been accepted by the Electoral Commission. That's just like what I was thinking. It did become anathema, not to some centralized stakeholder, but to probably the majority of the lads in the National Party, and probably to a lot of people who supported the National Party out there. And again, Barrett can say what he wants about that, but that is the reality. You know, oh, well, that's bad, or that's wrong, or they shouldn't, or we should do this, or we should do that. But that is just the reality. You can't just make things conform to your ideals, let's say, right? And that was the reality. That's basically, as far as I can see, a factual statement, right? So it is our hope that the decision by the Electoral Commission will give our members, supporters and the public a greater sense of confidence that the NP has moved on from the ambiguity and rancour of the past 2 years. The party now operates in a serious and equitable way, upholding the reputation of our members and ensuring their contributions, both monetary and labour, are treated with the highest standards of probity. This is our priority. We'll continue to articulate a coherent and radical message to the Irish people in line with our unchanged and nationalist ideology. See, that's the thing. That's my hope, would be my wish, that clearly, whatever you want to say about Barrett, he obviously, by definition, has to have had something or a lot to do with the stridency and the kind of solidity of the message originally. Like, let's have an actual nationalist message, an actual nationalist personnel, as opposed to conservative sort of shite. And again, like, they're not going to great pains to distance themselves from it rhetorically. At least we will continue to engage in the same in the kind of plodding but ultimately necessary hard work required to build a serious political party, avoiding performative stunts that serve no purpose other than to demoralize members and alienate the public. So yeah, they're throwing shots at Barrett, obviously, like, as is to be expected. But this was the great bit. This was maturity, magnanimity, benevolence, and maturity. I think I said that one already. Going forward, we believe the internecine rows between nationalists of all affiliations should immediately cease. While we profoundly disagree with Mr. Barrett's recent antics and have serious problems with his character, which make him unfit for leadership, we fully condemn the left-wing attack against a small group of his supporters on the weekend of 13 September. There is a greater enemy facing us than any other nationalist groups or individuals. It is important that everyone who calls themselves a nationalist should put Ireland first. Yeah, I just think that's great. That's like the question is put to bed now. Not that, oh, Barrett's been shot off to the moon, isn't that great or whatever. Barrett can do his thing. Good for him. Everybody do what they want to do, right? But at the end of the day, even if he disputes it in some sort of moral or some way like that, at the end of the day, the split was baked into the cake. So it's better to just like have it be sorted, right? And that's done now. And so that would be my take. Is great. Okay, National Party now have finally cleared the hurdle. They can just be what they are. Even if you're a critic, well, at least it's better for it to just arrive at its logical conclusion. In a sense, if you're like, even if you think, oh, that's not good, they're going to be subverted and become a bunch of normie cons or whatever, and ultimately go nowhere or sell out or something. It's like, well, if that's the case, then let them go nowhere and sell out. Like, at least just like, let's move on, that kind of thing. Or if Clan Éireann are doomed to, as the Merkin said, end up in Portlaoise getting sexually assaulted in a prison. I suppose we don't want that, but you know what I mean? It's like, whatever people's views are, either way, just like, let's just have it, let's get it, move on with whatever it is. And that'd be my take. So anyway, I feel like National Party handled that maturely, and I do hope that they do well at the end of the day, because I don't know what Clan Éireann's, maybe I'll talk to Barrett if he wants to at some point or whatever. I don't know what their secret recipe is. Like, Barrett back in the day with NP used to say that people used to say, well, what is your plan? And he would say it's a secret or whatever, which is, I don't know. But Clan Éireann, maybe I need to pay more attention. It's like, okay, so what's the idea here? What actually is the end goal, we'll say. But yeah, they can do their thing. A National Party, like, what I meant to say there was that the National Party are the closest thing to something that's actually going to do anything. The normicon parties aren't. David Quinn isn't. Ian Doherty or the rest of them. That whole crowd. Even the likes of Maria Steen. I hope she gets on the ballot and all of that, and she's very good in her own way. But like, it's better than having Heather Humphreys, but like, she's family values, and that's great. It is by itself, but that Iona type of stuff, it's like, it's limited to what it is. In terms of nationalism, with all the schizo and all the dysfunction and all of that, they are objectively the closest thing you could get to a party that, the kind of party that, not that they'd probably want me, but that, and I'm not particularly interested, but at least in in theory, hypothetically, I could at least envision myself joining, that type of way. Like, because that's a good sign. If you go, okay, I'm a bit of a purist myself. I don't want to be in a compromised party. I don't want to be in bullshit. Go along to get along too much. But I also don't want it to be a freak show or dysfunctional. I want it to function well. I want it to have a decent brand, to have some sort of respectability among the public, but also be sort of strident in its values. Be very hard pressed to find anything even remotely. Oh, the other aspect as well is just a party full of people that are relatively normal. I don't have a massively high bar. I'm not that normal, but just relatively normal. Do you know what I mean? Just people who look like, like people, you know what I mean? People who look like people who aren't in a radical party or whatever, just not like people in life, normal people. They kind of look like that, but they've just got Ireland belongs to the Irish or whatever. Like, you want all of that rolled into one as best as possible, that you can join, and you're Michael McCarthy and your Keith Woods. Keith is a member. I don't know what Michael does his own thing, but these emerging people out there, millennials and Zoomers and stuff, who who you're kind of going. I think a lot of these people, I'm using those guys as archetypes. It doesn't have to be them, but I mean, you can imagine someone like them. Who could they join? There's an intelligent young man out there. He's in engineering, or he's doing whatever he's doing, but he's not up for the low IQ slop. He's not up for the crazy shit. He's not up for the dysfunctional, like people who are just car crash, like public spectacles or whatever. But he just wants to join a party, but he doesn't want to join like the Iona world too much either, because that's just doesn't cut it. So where do you go? That feeling of you're homeless. Where is it there a party that I can get that? It is just, broadly speaking, proper nationalism. But also I could, like, if my friends and family saw that I was at a thing or with them or joined them or whatever, they might say, okay, you buy that purchase with the Irish people and with a potential membership. That is valuable. And as far as I can see, Quinlan, Councillor Patrick Quinlan, and the rest of them seem to be doing that. And they will have their critics as well, and we'll see how we go and all that. But so I don't know. To me, overall, a good thing. And even in terms of the split and this decision that was made by the Electoral Commission, I like how they handled it. Instead of seething about Barrett and obsessing over him, just let it go. You know what I mean? Just let it go, right? If you want to go be Normalsville, be a normal party where intelligent young Irish men and women, but also people who are somewhat strident, can join and find a home for themselves and grow, whether getting elected or not, or just activism, a mix of things, and just basically a little spot that people can be attracted to, that actually has a name and a location and a place and a phone number and all that. That's needed. It just, there's no argument against that. That is needed. So that is good. But then also, just let it go. We can't actually control what everyone does. Schizos, boomers, Zionist influence, that's all that stuff. And when I say boomers, you know what I'm saying, right? Boomerism. That's just, like, a lot of that stuff is just going to be there. And there's only, you can't control the world or whatever. You can't control all these things. You can discourage them or whatever, but, like, these things are going to be there. Barrett, whether you like them or not, Clonairon, whether you like them or not, they're kind of just going to be there. So the best thing you can do is just kind of do your thing, move on, go in that direction. Happy days. Which brings me to the Berkey and stuff. So I kind of maybe I'll have to find my own tweet. I kind of like went hard on one of their articles. And I found myself reading it. I was like, I called it repulsive, right? But it was just a gut reaction. But I read it again, and on second reading, I was like, well, do you know what? Well, their points are, I suppose, point by point, a lot of it is just legit. There's just something I took. I wasn't, as compared to, let's say, the National Party statement, I just found, like, you know, it's been sorted now, just leave it, but it took these articles took the opportunity to sort of take this perch and stand in judgment of absolutely everyone and anything, from the most elitist and crass sort of position or point of view. It just didn't sit right with me. So I'll go through it. Yeah, I described it as repulsive, but anyway, we'll have a look. And bear in mind, I wrote something. I wrote a very good one for the Burkean, and I think they're probably a bunch of good lads. But see what you think. So, and I'll just go through it, right? In 2002, Justin Barrett's political career hit the skids. Speaking engagements with Italian and German neo-fascists, denied originally, came back to haunt the 30-something-year-old militant during the Nice referendum. So anyway, he drifted from Fine Gael to like Euroscepticism, but he had this like neo-fascist past and the rest of it, right? There's a long history to do with Barrett. He had a punt at the European Parliament. He's been all over the gaff, let's say, and then they go on to say so he's basically had many different iterations over time, and we get to 2016. Barrett attempted to come back. The pre-repeal and pre-COVID political right was barren, and he offered himself a safe, electorally minded pair of hands. The early years of the National Party were defined by his populist base strategy, trying to carve out an electoral foothold while publicly and privately pledging to eschew Nazism after the Nice Treaty debacle. But I'll just get into where it seems to get a bit harsh, to my point of view. So yeah, where did they really take the gloves off after a while? Yeah, a theme during the 2010s and early 2020s was Barrett's indifference to the employment prospects of his members. The self-styled Cianara, living in the life of a social welfare parasite for 20 years, as younger and older members alike, many with families, juggled a principled patriotism with the inherent risk of HR nationalist politics. So they basically call him an alcoholic, a dole jockey. Then this is where, to me, it just is off the fucking, like, it's kind of a bit unhinged, right? By 2023, and with semi-frequent heart attacks, Barrett ditched any of his earlier promises of populism in the space of a year, with the demented wish to transform the party into a neo-Nazi doomsday cult. And they mentioned the heart attacks a few times. It's just kind of like, just let it go, bro. Like, he's with Clonairin, and then the pitch is that no, we're trying to save Clonairin people from his clutches or whatever. But I don't think that's really going to happen. I don't think this article is going to communicate that to any of them, because it's so harsh and because it's so, I'll be honest, because it's so anti-Nazi. I don't think you're like, by emphasizing that, you're actually going to immediately alienate anyone, if that's what your goal is, to save the Clonairin lads. You would imagine that if they're already out marching around with him, well, they're like pretty high up on Jewish conspiracy and all this kind of stuff. So the moment they see an anonymous Burkean article and they start going, oh, well, where's Burkean getting its funding from? Who's the anonymous author? Who's he connected to? La 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 la. And they see this like Nazism burns its communities, and all this kind of like borderline Antifa sounding stuff. You're obviously going to turn, like, almost entrench their position. So it can't so much be about saving them. So we're back to just like criticizing people for having heart attacks a little bit. It just seems a bit ghoulish to me, and not in the spirit of high IQ. In a sense, it's almost like self-contradictory. The idea of a sober, sophisticated, reasonable, respectable approach to things and all of that, but you're like, salivating about heart attacks and talking about getting RAPED'd in prisons and stuff. It's not the most normal thing in the whole world. And criticizing people for being extremely online and obtuse and idiosyncratic and all that. But it's like, look, whoever wrote this is by definition extremely online. How the fuck else could you know this level of tedious detail about a subgroup of a subgroup, of all this political nuance and history and stuff. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it just falls flat a little bit, and it just seems like a little bit sadistic for the sake of it. And one of these kind of drive-by character assassinations, blending ideological disagreements with unnecessary personal bullshit and sort of lording and elitism from a invisible little position. I just think that's shitty. I think it's reminiscent of Antifa and tabloids and all of that. Yeah, it goes to great pains to criticize American white nationalism and Nazism and all this, and it's like, okay, grand, you don't want to be going around in jackboots and swastikas, but it's personally, I'm just not in the business of going out of my way to counter signal all of that. We all know the gig with that. That's kind of like the albatross hung around the neck, and they say it needs to be distant. No, the answer is just to get over it. Get over it. I don't care about any of that. I'm bothered by a lot of things, right? But that stuff doesn't register with me, to be honest. You know, I don't do it. I'm not into it. I don't recommend it. I don't advertise any of that stuff. But I know where my opposition is. And the idea that you're constantly running away from that stuff and like vocally screaming from the rooftops over and over again makes it sound like an appeal to the liberal sort of thing. And the ironic thing about that is that we've never been in a time where it's been more normalized with the Israel-Palestine stuff. And with, like, there was a TikTok I saw a few months ago that was kind of funny. It was a bunch of juniors or the leaving cert lads or whatever. It just came up on the thing. And the joke was something along the lines of, oh, we're doing Jewish studies. We have some Jewish studies thing on one of our exams. And I can't remember how the TikTok went, but they were joking about 241 or whatever it is, the number of the whole World War II number question. But they were making basically a joke like that, and they had their real faces on and they were messing, and the thing had a ton of likes and people were laughing about it and having fun with it. And so there's a version of that, like, yeah, you don't want to go around the place with swastikas, but this whole idea that like the society is absolutely clutching its pearls about it like that anymore is not kind of the case, you know. So again, will you find me marching around like that? No. Will you find me endorsing it or boosting it? No. But insofar as I have any issue with Barrett or anyone else like that, that's not leading the issue, you know. You know, do you know what I mean? Like, that's not my problem. I don't get rattled about that. That's not. I could criticize Barrett. I suppose I could criticize it for being in poor taste or gaudy, but insofar as it's a terrible, great sin, and oh my God, let's watch Schindler's List and that kind of vibe, I'm not feeling that at all. You know what I mean? That's not it at all. And this thing is dripping in that, to be honest. So, you know, bargain basement, white nationalism, and this Nazism, and so yeah, it gets into some more of that personal attacks mixed with like a Rosa Luxemburg tier screed against fascism, effectively. So by 2023, yeah, he ditched it. I've kind of this young men wanted Pierce, but they were being offered Hitler. Such a like, and I agree. We should be all about Pierce and not about Hitler. Like I've said on many streams that I've never read Mein Kampf or Julius Evola or any of that stuff. So it's like when Antifa call me that, I'm just like going, well, I'm not running out of my way to disavow it or go, oh no, or whatever. That's the idea, is a center ground. It's like I don't buy into that, and you won't find me like making clutching my pearls about it. But just on a factual level, I just, you know, I'm an Irish person in 2025. I don't know, like, do you know what I mean? I'm not I'm just kind of somewhat agnostic on that. I have like a revisionist view of World War II and the rest of it, but just do I like call myself that, identify with that, think about that strongly? No. So I just feel like, when we're in this position now where we're so beyond that, to like run back to it and make great noises about it. And the other thing too is that at a time when Clan Éireann National Party have liberated themselves now, they're going off doing the normie thing now, in the sort of more normal and centre and all that. And they're free of it now. Clan Éireann is like a small smattering of lads. Like I see them pop up in the timeline once in a while. I don't even get it. Far be it from me to excoriate, really. Like any harm that you could say has been done to people has been done. Any intervention you could stage with Clan Éireann members now for their own good is rendered useless by all of this kind of rhetoric. So why, yeah, young men wanted Pierce, but they're being offered Hitler. What else have we got? Per many European examples dealing with neo-Nazi cranks, a collective albatross placed around the neck of it. There's more on the N question, the N word, the Nazi word. And again, there's some legitimate critiques, like one after another, sure. That's the thing. If it was about Barrett and about his legacy and his flawed legacy and how Clan Éireann is flawed and stay away from it or whatever, that'd be grand. But it's the dripping in like sadistic personal attacks and the Rosa Luxemburg shit. I just find strange. There was something else about Nazism burns our children and our communities or something like that. It's just like, are we really at that? Is that where we're at? Yeah, and talking about how they'll end up in prison and they'll all kill each other, and like, oh, probably one of the Clan Éireann lads is just going to kill him if he doesn't die of a heart attack first, or they're going to all end up in a prison getting RAPED'd and this, that, and the other. It's just like, I thought you were the normal one and the smart one and like the sophisticated, like upper class person or whatever. Like, what, which one is it? Right? And not too online and not too in the weeds or whatever. Which one is it? Assuming Barrett does not succumb to a heart attack, the kids will peel off, leaving a criminal, autistic, and psychopathic core in the lead up to prescribement and a ham-fisted terror plot, no doubt, timed ahead of an important election cycle. No schizos in this room. An entirely reasonable theory is that Barrett will be killed, likely by one of his older chuds, when they realize the 4'0" ex blah blah blah. Right. Neo-fascist groups consistently elevate unstable narcissistic figures who thrive on personal loyalty rather than organizational discipline. Just this kind of stuff. It's like, look, you will find that in libertarian groups and communist groups. You'll find it in like all but like mainstream political parties who select for ambitious climbers and conformists or whatever. Like, you stray outside of that, and yeah, there's going to be an increasing tendency of people who are maybe a little bit idiosyncratic, unstable, narcissistic. I don't think it's inherently connected to white nationalists and Nazi dregs and all this kind of stuff. This kind of associating and just the whole mixed stew of this thing just strikes me the wrong way. It mentions National Socialist again in some sort of way. It just keeps harping on this and that and the other. And it's like, again, criticize Barrett, leave the heart attacks out of it, leave the RAPE cages out of it, maybe leave the someone's going to kill someone else in some fantasy out of it, and leave the Gloria Steinem rhetoric out of it as well, maybe, and then maybe you have a legitimate kind of critique. But even then, it's like, well, Barrett's just kind of in the rear view now as far as the sophisticated centrist or like, moderated nationalism is concerned. So what's the point? Catholics know that Nazism doesn't build communities, it burns them. Narcissistic personality disorders wear many guises. So yeah, it's this kind of tone of psychoanalyzing um, psychoanalyzing, and I don't know. I read here Imperator Scotorum. I'll throw this one up. A regular chatter, so it deserves a shout. Um, the article goes very easy on Barrett Garrod. I've spoken to people who've had lots of dealings with the man before, and I can tell you there's very much more damaging stuff they could have included. Yeah, look, sure. But like I say, it's not an individual aspect of this I take issue with. Like I say, there's lots of elements of this are legit points, warranted points. Um, uh, you know, yeah, Barrett's organizational failings and his whatever is to do with NP and the rest of it. That's fine. Like, I mean, if you want to go out there and roast someone, fine. But just like I say, heart attacks and people killing each other and hypothetically getting RAPD'd, and um, they might say, "Oh, well, I do think that," or whatever. But it's a bit speculative and a bit gratuitous, maybe. And then, like I say, combined with the Gloria Steinem stuff about the far ideological right, let's put it that way. It's the mixing of all those things together. It's just a bit strange to me. But again, whatever, they can write what they want. And so they go on to another one. So it's just basically Burkean are putting themselves in this position of this whole idea of like a move from crankism and schizoism and let's say a lot of that typified by Barrett, and the opposite to that typified by Quinlan, and some more sober actors, we'll say, and more normalism, we'll say. They're kind of taking out the kind of the switchblade on the former, and just really going hard on it. But I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm a reasonable person. I'm happy to kind of go, yeah, okay, they largely have a point. But again, one of the things I said as well is that, well, I think this warrants transparency as well. The criticism of anons, we all have that to some extent, but there's an element of like cards on the table as well, like who's who, what's the dog in the fight. Because like I say, politics is such a filthy game. Even people with the right intentions and stuff, people can have associations, and they could be buddies with the NP now, or I'm not saying they are, I don't know, but there can be a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and it's good to kind of know that Nask is Nask and Justin Barrett is Clanair, and Gript kind of tend to support the David Quinn world and the Iona, and McGurk has his associations and he is what he is, and I could criticize that too, but we know where we kind of stand on these things. There's an element of like, well, if you're going to kind of position yourself as the final lambaster and critic of everything before you, like in front of you, in the most sort of excoriating way imaginable, and talking about like the NS stuff in this kind of very jettison-y way, which there are people out there who will just say, well, like, look, I'm not up for stomping around with swastikas or whatever. I'm not that type of person, like literally not a Nazi. But at the same time, we're all, there's a lot of people out there who are a bit sus of running in the opposite direction for understandable reasons. We all know how the right wing works. So I'm not like making any particular inference there, but just if you're doing all of those things at the same time, there is, a bit of an onus to be like, well, okay, so we're all doing it wrong. Everyone's retarded. Everyone's a schizo. Everyone's a white nationalist skinhead, whatever. Nazism doesn't build communities, it burns them. if you want to do all this and go whole hog on the whole thing, basically put yourself in that position, then there is an element of like, well, okay, ultimate critic, who are you? You know what I mean? And it doesn't, like, just in general, a general who are you, not docs or particular, but just a general, like, well, who are you? Like, you know what I mean? There is that thing of like, we need to all be normal, hide our power levels, have normal lives and communities and jobs, and we need to not say anything controversial basically at all, or at least like really run from that, kind of build ourselves as like an average Fine Gael candidate with a slightly more nationalist, comments here and there. But we need to do all that, and all the other, everyone else is like a schizo and a loser and a this, that, and the other. But it's kind of one of those things that the criticism I have of it overall is that, well, it is a kind of a heady, difficult environment, like by structurally the system, the Antifa having basically carte blanche to go kill people, right? People who express nationalist sentiment, even if they're somewhat moderate about it, could face issues at work, right? HR, ostracization, all the rest of it, right? That's not an excuse to be a complete simpleton and like a deranged, isolated weirdo and all that. But it's like, well, the environment is what it is. And so it's like people are out there. Like there's a reason why you get like Mr. Normal is in Fine Gael and whatever, and Mr. Not Normal might be more routinely found on the, call it the far right or whatever. It's like, well, yeah, it's sort of like an evolutionary selection process in a way. And so we have these issues for sure, but again, it's just one of those things of like if you want to lambaste the entire right wing for being wrong across the board almost, and all these personalities, these people who've come and gone and whatever, as doing it so wrong or whatever. But it's like, well, it is an element of like, well, who are you and where are you? That type of thing. And someone like Quinlan and the National Party personnel, Jan and all these lads, well, they can pass that test. They go, well, here I am. I'm doing it, right? I'm like, to some extent or another, they're out there walking the tightrope fairly well, and they are who they are. But when I read the National Party statement, it's fairly magnanimous, fairly reasonable, fairly conciliatory. And when I read the Burkean stuff, it's like, it's just taking an absolute butcher knife to everything and anyone in this really difficult environment. It's almost talking about it like you're dealing in a world where we don't have the oppression that we do, and that electoral success is hamstrung by schizos and maladapted personality types and the rest of it, when in reality, that's somewhat the case, but that's to ignore the structural limitations. You find me a proper nationalist party that isn't Trump, right? And some people like Trump, but it's a bit of a joke, right? Or Farage or Maloney or who else is there? I mean, you name it. A nationalism with a little bit more integrity than that, coherence. Thierry Badeau or what, Dries van Langenhoven or whatever, these kind of people, these are like archetypical of people who are, again, walking the tightrope. I think Dries is probably a better example I think it's the Netherlands. Walking the tightrope, he's fairly good on all the stuff. Chad, normal, like you couldn't print off a better version of someone who's playing normal, but also has like solid on the ideas. And he's getting chucked in jail left, right, and center. And he tries to start, I don't know the details, but he's not going to get anywhere electorally or any of that. Hamstrung all over the place. Most men in his position if they had gone about 10% of the journey he had, they would have just completely fallen apart as people. And just because of the pressure of it, people aren't built for that, right? We're built to just sort of conform and get along, go along, get along for the best. And when you're being attacked by the state, like Selner and the rest of them, who are very much walking the tightrope, like they could be a lot more radical. They're already sacrificing a lot to try and be normal, right? And even then they're getting hounded and attacked and limited by the state all over the place. And they're great, they are great men, right? As just as people. And anything less than that would have just completely caved in and fallen apart. And their prospects in the political arena properly are sort of totally stymied. So it's just kind of like, well, yeah, like, I mean, that's relevant, isn't it? You know what I mean? You're dealing in a position where like there's a very few amount of people who have what it takes to be able to get to the point where they're totally stymied, to be able to survive to even get to that point, you know, that kind of way. So we're in that environment, and that has a selection effect. It has a detrimental effect. It ruins people's lives. It'll just chews people up and spits them out. I lament that. I think it's sad. I think it's a pity. I think it's to be condemned and fought against, and there needs to be some amount of solidarity among people, and a little bit of gratitude, in a sense, towards the broad picture. Like even someone like Barrett, for all his faults, I know he's got huge critics, but at the end of the day, you know, like he might be a terrible guy. Ask some former NP person or whatever, they'll say, no, you don't know the 50 things he did at grand. But at the end of the day, to some extent, he did throw his hat in the ring, even if you think he did it the worst way ever. And to that extent, I can respect him. I can disrespect him if you bring all the bad stories to me on these other things, but I can still respect, to some extent, the difficult world he threw himself into. Someone could say maybe he would have been better off not doing it. It would have been less detrimental. I don't know, but there's an extent to which you have to appreciate the oppression that we're all under, and to some extent the sacrifices that a lot of people make to just be out there, imperfect and all as they may be to varying extents. And that's just one of those things that I feel like, to get up on the high horse and from a sort of some perch, like unknown, and sort of take a butcher knife to everything and anyone a little bit, if they're not Dries van Langenhoven or whatever. It's like, I agree, everybody should be like him, and for sure a lot of the extremity of the schizo stuff and the low human capital and all, I get that. But it's just, there's an element of like, well, there needs to be a little bit of charity as well mixed in with that, a little bit of understanding for the actual environment that nationalism operates in. And to the extent that you could avoid all of that grief as an individual, a real person, to the extent that you could like sidestep that, you would have to just become, you know, you would have to go to like Nick Delahanty tier, or more moderate again, probably more, because he still got battered by your man, or like, you know, challenged by your man on kind of unfairly on bullshit on TV. Like they went for him as well. And they gave a softball to Joanna Donnelly. You know, you're dealing with this like assassination game in one sense or another, even if you're kind of moderate. So it's like, if that's the environment, I just feel like people who are in the background, pointing fingers left, right, and center, just is a bit rich, and it might be a lot of uncomfortable truths, and there's someone's got to say it. So to that extent, that's cool, but it's like that sort of, that idea of taking that knife to everything from the safe spot, is like, well, okay, so, you know, it's sort of lacking in an answer. It's like, okay, everyone becomes normal, but at the end of the day, the oppression is still there, hardcore, for anyone who starts to crack through, right? It's just waiting there. The further you go, the hotter it gets, and that's structural. And then, of course, within right-wing politics, you have a constant draw funding, praise, whatever it is, connections that are given to you from on high. And this is where I become the schizo conspiracy theorist, right? The like NATO world, the American sort of thing, the Zionist thing. You get it from Britain with the British fake politics. You get it from the Europe thing, the national conservatism with Yoram Hazoni and like people like that are kind of like, if you go up the chain, running all that stuff a little bit. But if you go to the lower level, it's a bunch of trad cats in Budapest, all at like some mass march or whatever, and they all look Chad and cool or whatever. But it's like, well, that stuff, like, it's grand, you know, but no matter where you go, there is a huge draw and pull, and it's a corrupting influence that is there, and it's been there forever. You know, we could all, I hope we all are familiar with that. These things are all real. So you have like you have the pressure from outside, you have the corrupting influence from inside. These things are all real. So the amount of hurdles that have to be crossed for anything even remotely resembling a legit figure representing nationalist politics are massive. And it's basically like, you know, the Swiss cheese model, like where you have to go through every hole just in like, you know, several layers to even have a chance. And even then they just chuck you in jail or whatever. These are the realities that we all know we're dealing with. It's high altitude stuff. And a lot of people aren't cut out for it, or very few are. And if you want to avoid it, if you want to avoid that negative stimuli, then you have to basically be broken before you even get off the ground. You have to kind of almost, you know, sacrifice the point and just almost become like a slightly right-wing version of Fine Gael or something, like slightly nationalist, I don't know, Jack Posobiec or something. And what they always say is, yeah, hide the power levels until you get into, that's bullshit, you know, as well. It's a fraught environment. It's an oppressed environment. It's like being a dissident in North Korea or whatever. So just imagine going around to dissidents in North Korea, again, from a high horse, being like, what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? And everyone's a dickhead or whatever. It's like, hey, like, you have to acknowledge as well the position people are in, and not just laugh about people being thrown in cages to be raped and all of the rest of it. It's like, look, you know, I'm against all of that. I'm against the state. And in terms of Clon Éireann getting attacked, it's not their fault. And I would support them all day long, regardless of criticisms of Barrett, and not sort of take glee in, again, pointing the finger from some unknown position. I don't know if that makes sense to you there, but yeah, they've another. Well, what was their next one? A confederacy of dunces: how Ireland's schizo right tackles nationalism. Yeah, the morons, the schizo right, the idiots responsible for setting back Irish nationalism, this and that person, the anonymous accounts on X, the deranged boomer conspiracy theorists. Like, my take on all those things, right? Washed up citizen journalists, right? You know, again, that kind of thing, right? Now, someone like, you know, they could say, a citizen journalist, is that Phil Dwyer? Is that yours truly? Is that whoever? This kind of, like, again, a lot of these people, for whatever criticism you could make, they've done a lot, they've faced a lot of shit. And the environment doesn't really allow for, like, there's a lot of people out there who are on, you know, good jobs and all that, but they can't even go anywhere remotely near this stuff because they'll get sacked. And that would be the same even if they went to National Party now. And I suppose the idea is, if you could move our position to where it's more normal, to where the high human capital people could approach it. Like I said a while ago, that's a good thing. But at the same time, that's not going to go away. That's absolutely still going to be there. No matter how much you moderate it, you're going to have a lot of grief coming at you. Like I say, perfect example is someone like Dries van Langenhoven. That would just be the example I would sort of counter argue, is like, look, someone like him, totally normal, cool Chad, professional as fuck gets absolutely eaten alive by the state, you know, that's going to have an effect on the ecosystem. And basically what I say is that's going to have an effect on the real people who are really involved, the people who are flawed, the people who are insufficient, the people who are extremely sufficient and unflawed alike. It's going to have this devastating impact on their lives, full stop. And I just feel like there has to be a bit of respect for that, as opposed to like everyone's just a low capital, low IQ, schizo fucking moron, unlike me being who, like, you know. So it's, again, it's just the throwing stones from behind the curtain type of thing is a little bit not what we're trying to do, I would say. How does this tail up? I'll just wrap it up. Well, there is a dire need for more respectable public-facing nationalist figures in Ireland. True. The schizo right distort and undermine these efforts by acting out in increasingly foolish manners. Their stupid outbursts and rants, digitally or in real life, jeopardize the overall image. That's the other thing, is that the normals, right? The normal high IQ, high capital and all this stuff. My view is that if you're, let's say you contain all that within the new National Party and they're doing their thing, just do it. Like someone out there who's ranting and raving online, or someone who's like got the end is nigh, whatever you want to say, right? Those people can, the good party can just do its thing. That's my belief anyway. They can just do their thing. And in terms of having a critique, that's the other thing about Clonare and Justin Barrett and National Party. The National Party, to my view, can only benefit from criticism from its right, let's say. I always, like, there are people out there, like someone like Eric Stryker, American commentator and all that, very purist about all this stuff. Attacks Keith Woods, I think, unfairly a lot, questions his motives, makes assumptions, goes overboard, and the rest of it. Someone like him came in and questioned me on something about Bob Vylan recently, right? But my point is, regardless of people's character flaws or whether you like them or not, when these people come along, is that I go, hey, I actually appreciate, to some extent, questioning and a challenging and of my positions. Someone who's forcing me to second guess going along with the comfy developing narrative and consensus that we have, and someone who can almost imply that I'm a bit of a sellout or a bit weak or a bit whatever it is on this or that issue, or moving in this or that direction. I've no problem with that. I welcome that, you know, because it's a, and this is the key point, if anything, right, of what I'm saying here after all this, is that kind of pressure, within reason, that kind of pressure is actually a good thing in a structural way for right-wing politics. Because if you're Mr. in the center and you're Mr. Normal, it's probably good to have a balancing pressure there to keep you honest, basically, right? And I always appreciate, because I know the tendency would be there in me too, to kind of go along with narratives and like for convenience and stuff. So it's good to have that kind of being barked at from the right. And anonymous people online serve that function quite well sometimes. If I go to it, when I've went to towns where the local Gombeen politician is all for stopping the asylum centre and sounds good, and then the far left NGO pressure comes on them, and then they start like losing their hair. I've always said that, well, to some extent, I have to go overboard with the criticism and sort of call them Gombeen traitors, and that the town should be wary of them and all the rest of it. One, because that's true, but two, because there's such a big pressure being applied by RTE and the anti-racists and all that, that they will just run with the stimulus. The stimulus is pushing them in that direction. And so there needs to be an equal and opposite pull the other way to kind of keep them at least where they started. You know what I mean? That's always been my view on just influence, right? And so there being some Vanguard right wing, maybe you don't like Justin Barrett, he's not the guy, he's guilty of this and that and the other. But in principle, that there would be a further right nipping at the heels of the National Party as we know it now, nipping at my heels, nipping at the Burkeans' heels and all that. I wouldn't want that to be chalked up as neo-Nazi, terrible people who should be locked in a cage, right? Or schizo losers, or whatever. It would be very easy for this Burkean rhetoric to kind of take the genuine schizoism and take the genuine low human capital problem and sort of fold it in with what could be a critiquing flank of this new emergent, moderate, normal, and yet ideally still ideologically rigid right. It needs to have a flank, and a flank is a good thing, and it's no harm at all. And I wouldn't want this scathing, sort of all over the place criticism stuff to intentionally or unintentionally sort of try to purge that rightward critique from the picture. That's kind of my conclusion, let's say, put it that way. So I do believe, I know I ramble and I know I just kind of go along on the fly, but I do believe, taking it from my experience of the National Party originally and for all its flaws, and then taking for what's good of it, and all the issues with Barrett and some things maybe you could credit him on and loads you could criticize him on, and then the move into the new party, which for the majority, for the most part, is absolutely not only a good thing but essential, but comes with this kind of move comes with all those pressures as well, and that there is a need for there to be basically a further right in some form or another, or at least this criticism and this pull, keeping it real, that needs to be there. And like, so I feel like I've delivered a coherent message, actually, start to finish, if you were with me. And that's the conclusion, is that the moderation, the normalization is maybe a better word. It's a much better word. Normalization needs to happen, but it needs to be accountable as well to something, and that includes me. You know what I mean? I need to be held accountable by someone, and that someone is going to be a more strident and sort of particular and never good enough and all that kind of critic. And it might be ideologically out there, it might be gaudy, it might be controversial, it might be all these things to some extent. But if I have a choice between having it there, off in the quiet, I don't have to be totally associated with it, but it's there, versus I go out of my way to try and purge it and excoriate it. I don't want that. The other thing, one more thing, that strikes me, makes me uncomfortable with the Burkean stuff, is, again, the idea that you would have that blank critic of, like, not just the National Party, but everything that it represents now, this sort of normalizing thing. The idea that you might potentially take critics, legitimate critics, right? People who are performing that function effectively of keeping them honest. And I'm not claiming I'm going to do that, but just someone out there doing that, challenging them a little bit that way. The idea that you would conflate that with schizoism or extremism or whatever, and then you would combine that into the most gutter personal attacks, you know, whatever it is, washed up, low human capital, you know, on the dole, what else is there, whatever, left his wife, or what is some shit like that, right? Kind of that usual stuff. Basically the stuff you would ordinarily associate with Antifa. The idea that that becomes part of the criticism of that flank, you know what I mean? That it becomes this kind of kill shot type of shit, as opposed to taking ideas on the face of it. That's the big thing for me. I've always felt like that with contra the likes of Antifa. I've tried to take ideas on at face value. So it doesn't matter whether the person is a multi-millionaire, black belt, or whether the person is a neat in their mom's attic, right, who hasn't washed in 2 weeks or whatever. Either way, to me, if the idea has some legitimacy to it, and it doesn't matter if it's supposedly extreme or radical or whatever, according to the sensibilities of the Late Late Show, and none of that stuff matters to me. The idea, if it's a fair and legitimate idea and has some weight to it, then it's valid. And if it's of me, all good. From some critiquing position or whatever, like that I'm not pure enough or whatever it is, or I'm too pure, that's all good. But it's when it becomes normalized to mix it all up in character assassination, and mix the idea of someone not being ideal for the job with dismissing the ideological critique. I don't know, that idea of circling wagons around a bourgeois normalized consensus in such a vicious and, to my mind, a little bit sadistic and underhanded way, I just doesn't sit right with me. I think I've made the point anyway. Yeah, I think that's important to make. I do. There's a balance to be struck, and you don't strike these delicate balances with fire and brimstone and the most gutter of tactics and conflating ideas with personalities, with personal lives, with all that kind of stuff. Mixing all that up into the one is, to me, just is not. It's not even that it's mean or something. It's that it's not in. It doesn't respect. It doesn't respect truth, and it doesn't respect the value of ideas, because of course you're not focusing so much on ideas, you're focusing on, it becomes tabloid tier shit. And there's a reason tabloids do what they do, is because they don't want to address someone's ideas, millennial woes or something by the vile vlogger, these kind of things. It's because they don't want to deal with the ideas, they go the other route. So it doesn't become people who are further to the right or have different ideas. It becomes schizos, losers, anons, whatever it is. And insofar as those points are true, you wouldn't want to. It's a dangerous line. Like, I just think, I'll stop now, but navigating this delicate sort of move forward requires, I feel like, the magnanimity and the carefulness. If you're going to leave the losers behind type of thing, and you're going to go, let's be normal, let's be cool, let's be professional, you want to do that in a professional kind of way as well, don't you? Like, do your thing, let the actions speak kind of louder than the words. Just don't include the schizos. Keep the high human capital people in there. Do your thing and advance kind of that way. Because you're not going to be able to control people who are weirdos and dumb or whatever anyway. So just kind of navigate it delicately like that. And I think when everybody gets their fucking knives out, it just doesn't help that so much. You already have so much consternation around some of these articles, like, a little bit. It's just like, I don't know why. But anyway, a couple of super chats there, and I'll finish up. And like, I agree with almost 90% of what they're saying. Like, the content, the basic idea, true. The National Party said it too in their way. But just especially that one about Barrett, it sounded almost to me like it was written by, Antifa. I know it wasn't, but it sounded like it was almost sounded like it was delighting in the oppression that gets thrown around against different people, flawed or not. It was delighting in all that, and sort of delighting in it from what position, that kind of way. I've never seen that before. I've been around for a long time in this stuff. I've never seen something like that. That kind of tone, that kind of a little bit of sadism, pontificating, pompousness, and all of that kind of thing. From what position exactly doesn't strike me well. So super chats. Derek McManus 2, a tip from a Protestant in Northern Ireland. So Derek, thank you, is someone who keeps telling me that it's not the north of Ireland, it's the Northern Ireland, because Donegal is apparently up more northerly. So the north of Ireland doesn't make sense, but Northern Ireland does. He's a Protestant, right? In north of Ireland. I'd just say I'm going to keep saying north of Ireland. Northern Ireland doesn't make any more sense, logically anyway. Like if you're going to call the place you think you're from Northern Ireland, then like Donegal would be Northern Ireland too, just as much as it would be north of Ireland. So it's just, you're a Protestant, you think you're in Britain or something, or the UK, which is your view. And I've different views or whatever. It's like, it's fine. Like, we can just be on different sides of that fence. But, I'm not trying to make you say things my way. You leave me say my things my way, respectfully. But thank you for the super chat from a Protestant in Northern Ireland. Appreciate it, Derek. 10 from 00. This is a great moment for the movement. Barrett is a tool. Look, that's the thing. Some people think I'm like, you're defending Barrett and all that. I'm not at all. It's just a case of like, I think a radical fringe way out there on the right is actually no harm, and in a sense it's beneficial, even though you don't have to be associated with it. When people say this thing that like whoever Burkean was trying to kind of infer, which is that if there is this, from bourgeois perspective, extreme or radical right wing out there, NS related and all that, if that's out there, what it serves to do is drag down our like normie elected candidate, Maria Steen or whatever, right? This kind of thing. It drags that down. It's a threat to that or whatever. And I just fundamentally don't agree with that. It's like, no, it doesn't. I mean, it's not connected to any of that, like in anyone's perception. I don't think so. Oh no, we're going to lose the Pat Kenny will think. It's like, I don't even think so. Like, I don't think there's any evidence at all that someone is dragged down by some other disassociated other entity. There's no evidence. And in fact, if there's to be any connection, it's that they are seen as distinct, but the outside fringe group does apply some pressure rhetorically among the sort of the right-wing crowd, does apply a bit of pressure and force that other crowd to be a bit more, to not kind of cook out too much, right? And so that's basically the only connection. And if that's the only connection, then that's a good thing, unless you have a fundamentally different perspective and different interests and stuff like that. That's kind of my view on that. It's not about defending Barrett. It's about basically going, yeah, we're not Antifa. We don't go around fucking mixing ideological disputes with well, you're a loser though, or whatever. It's like, hey, someone could be, like I say, multi-millionaire kickboxing champion, or they could be in need or whatever. Like, and that's the other thing too. We live in a world where it's like, we need people who are like pillars of their community and this, that, and the other. Everyone else is, and we do need those things, but right, I agree. But everyone else is a fucking piece of shit. Or should shut the fuck up and all this. It's like, well, like I just, we live in a world where how many people are pillars of their community and like very professionally successful and all this stuff and thriving away and this, that, and the other. We live in a disintegrated society, like in a large part. people under the age of 35, like the majority of them don't have houses. They're living in precarious situations, stultifying situations. They're kind of totally goosed. Social atomization is pretty big. It's not just confined to right-wing spurgs or whatever. It's kind of proliferated a little bit. It's not the norm necessarily, but you know what I mean? We live in the society we live in as well. So to set this bar of like, you know, a bar is good for party leaders and this, that, and the other, but like to kind of have this like cruel tone towards anyone but that, to me just seems bonkers. Like, anyway. But yeah, so I'm not actually defending Barrett per se, you know, it's a bit more nuanced than all that. Thank you. Sovereign Era 5, thank you, says Barrett was not fit to lead, plus blackpilled after one election. National Party is still ethno-nationalist, but Irish while working with nationalists abroad. Yeah, that is good. And again, working with nationalists abroad, always a poison chalice as well. Like, not always, sorry. It can be. It's one of those things that one has to be wary of. It's great to make connections. It's great to get big connections in high places and all of that, but it comes with risks as well, you know. So it's the idea of basically maximizing all of that stuff while minimizing compromise, minimizing drift internally, psychologically and organizationally and all that. Like, that's obviously the balancing act, and it's going against everything in human nature and societal, basically mammalian nature. It really is. So it's such a fight to try and balance those things. And the problem, I think, maybe with someone like Barrett is that he's so committed to Barrett and people like him, so committed to their version of uncompromising sort of ideology. And you could add in personal flaws or whatever, put them aside. Just such a commitment to ideological purity that it becomes basically you're standing in a phone box by yourself, right? You and two other lads, because and even you've got the knives out, sharpening for each other as well, because the other one is a traitor or whatever, right? Or a cook. That's the problem. So it can just go like, basically there's an inevitable draw and sort of attraction both ways potentially, depending on the person. But the one of being a schizo and too extreme and all that, we've seen that now or whatever, but let's not pretend that on the other side of that spectrum there isn't a much more powerful, they say, like, what is it, remigration is inevitable. Well, influence from bigger places, and the higher you get, the more intoxicating it gets, right? The idea that that doesn't exist and isn't massively dangerous and problematic in its own way. That's the thing, is that's how I see the balance. Yeah, so, but I have, as I'm not a mind reader, but Patrick Quinlan leading the National Party, as it is, I've no reason to question his sincerity, commitment, organizational capacity, stability, high human capital, and all that. All the rest, I have no reason to question all of that. But I'm sure even if you asked him, he would probably be wise enough to admit that, yeah, like it says it in their own statement, they acknowledge it, right? They acknowledge it openly. They really go to pains to acknowledge that for a reason. And I'm sure there's a lot of people within the party who feel that way too. So these things need to be balanced, and you don't form a balance by launching deeply personal attacks on critics or others, right? Yeah, and while basically lick-arsing your way into the center, at the same, there needs to be the balanced rhetoric on this, like, that would be my view. But I'm pleased that Patrick Quinlan is leading the National Party and they have the personnel that they have. Because if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be that crew of people, to be honest. So it's up to them now. And we have Finola Muraku 5, just a super sticker. Thank you very much, Finola. And Loch Riera 5 says, never waver in striving for an authentic 32 county Gaelic Ireland united and free, united and free. Does not yield to any foreign force, Westminster, Brussels, or other. Yeah, the plot thickens, you know, because you apply standard nationalism, like the kind of garden variety, pan-Western nationalism, anti-immigration, and all the rest of it, in with the northern issue, right? The 6 counties. That's a whole. It's like, I think of it as like, I don't know, Syria tier of complication. Like, I of course I want my 32 counties, but and we will have it. But it's like the fact that the immigration question overlaps with that, with the sea border, land border question, and it interlinks with Britain, which is like loaded up with these foreigners and Boris wave. And they don't really have the gumption that Ireland has, to be honest. They're a bit more alienated from each other. And Britain is teeming with MI5 or MI6 influence. MI5, which one is which? And that's especially strong in the north, among certain communities. Basically, it's speaking of the Burkean, they had a piece on it before. Just the idea that like it's a petri dish for social experimentation, sectarianism, infiltration, all that stuff. You just add that all together, and like, okay, trying to get your 32 counties and modern era nationalism. We've got such a impossible battle in a sense. But that's what it is, you know. Yeah. Anyway, not to get too dramatic about it all or whatever, but you know, when you just set out the list of requirements, we're like, oh man, like, yeah. But I suppose those things might happen independently from each other anyway. So anyway, look, thanks for joining me tonight. I just wanted to get some of that off my chest. The kind of whole, I do believe that it's a significant shift. It's not just about a party registration, name change, or whatever. The whole question around Barrett, the National Party, is almost subsidiary to the question of like the broader shift. Like, okay, we're normalizing. How does that get navigated? You know, and who does what and who says what and whose interests are what interests. That's just a huge question. It's something we're in the middle of, I think, you know, and you see it across all Western countries. Like it's kind of happening. The mainstreaming must be done right and done faithfully. So anyway, that's what happened today. That official consolidation of the National Party is like a milestone in that journey, an important milestone in that journey in an Irish context. So that's the crack, basically. I'm off to bed. I assume you're going to do the same in stream. Thanks for joining me. Thank you, super chatters. Thanks everybody in the chat just contributing, and for anyone watching now or after the fact. Hope you're well. So for now, Ihawa. See ya.